Welcome to the Darkstream, Vox Day, voxday.blogspot.com. My apologies for being a little bit late. I was actually just talking to the good folks at the Alex Jones Show, and we were discussing my coming on the show tomorrow. And so that's the plan. I believe I will be on with Alex from 1 p.m. Central Time is the time that that we're looking at. So tonight we're going to talk about science fraud and its intersection with human genetics. And I didn't know what I was going to talk about tonight. You know, I was actually interested in talking perhaps about unauthorized.tv, which is going extremely well. And, I'm really astonished by the level of support that folks are providing for this obvious work in progress. I mean, it's amazing, but there's already 1,285 active subscribers, and there's already 1,750 people who have signed up, preparatory to subscribing. And so it's really amazing to see how that is all coming together much, much faster than we expected. I don't know. I have a webcam tonight. I just forgot to turn the cover off. Vox, do you think you can change the name from unauthorized.tv? No, we're not going to change it. That's the name that we've chosen intentionally. What we're going to talk about, I believe, is going to be false flags in general, conspiracy theory, and possibly the events in New Zealand. So, are there any benefits to joining now? Yes, you support the creators that you like to watch. That's what we are. I mean, that's the main reason for supporting it. If you're looking for features and so forth, we will be adding those things. But the main reason to do it is in order to support the Big Bear. We've got a subscription that's set up to do exactly what the YouTube memberships were doing. I'm not in the least bit concerned about the fact that somebody's mother somewhere might think that it's some sort of adult site. I think that you should. I think that you should not worry about such things, and leave the marketing up to us. And we also, by the way, we've arranged to pick up unauthorized.tv spelled in the English fashion. We actually went to get it, and one of our listeners actually picked it up before us. And so we worked out an arrangement to get that transferred over and so forth. Animatronic, if you wanted to signal viewers that you're in danger, how would you do it? I would say, I'm in danger, and this is why. It's not an issue. I'm not concerned about it in the slightest. What is the earliest historical account of a false flag that you can think of? It's ancient. It's absolutely ancient. I can think of examples in Roman history. I can think of examples in Chinese military history. It is absolutely common. It's absolutely normal There's nothing at all unusual about conspiracies. There's nothing at all unusual about false flags. These are absolutely normal things. And so yeah, I don't buy the Alex Jones is Bill Hicks thing. Come on. I absolutely believe in conspiracy theory because conspiracies are how most organizations affect change. A conspiracy just means a group of people getting together and operating in coordination in order to make something happen. So, it's, let's see, Vile Faceless Heretic says, Vox, do you need the VFM to screen unauthorized subscribers, do background checks? No, I mean, the subscribers just, we welcome anyone who wants to help support the channel. We're not going to take investment, and we're not going to, bring anybody on as a creator that we have doubts about. So, anyhow, if you just look at U.S. history or even recent military history, there's very little doubt that the burning of the Reichstag by the Nazis was a false flag. There's very there's very little doubt that there were false flags involved in several of the invasions of Nazi Germany. When they invaded the smaller European countries, they tried to portray them as them having been attacked. That's absolutely normal. Absolutely normal. If you look at the USS Maine, the Lusitania, the Tonkin Gulf incident, it's false flags are just a stratagem. They're used all the time on every side. It's not a situation where, gee, bad people do it and good people don't. And sometimes there's a whole sequence of things where both sides are engaging in some elements of it, like when the Molotov-Ribbentrop peace agreement, non-aggression agreement, between Germany and the Soviet Union, and they're both trying to portray the other as the aggressor. And so, it's just, it's a normal thing to do. Pearl Harbor, it wasn't a false flag. The Japanese actually did attack Pearl Harbor. But the question is, did they attempt to, was it a complete surprise? Probably not. And it's kind of funny where they say, well, FDR caused it because of this. Well, no. Even though there were U.S. provocations, economic provocations, it's not like that necessarily caused the attack on Pearl Harbor. And so, a number of people are pointing out that Bismarck habitually used false flags. And so deception is part of war. It's intrinsically part of war. There's, if you look at the struggle in the Middle East between the Israelis and between the Palestinians and the Arab nations, I would guess that most of the things that are reported out of there are false in one way or another. You've seen the videos of the supposedly dead people, falling on, getting dropped off the cot and then getting up. There's all sorts of these things. Again, I have no information. I don't know much about New Zealand. I haven't really paid that much attention to it because the whole thing just looked like such a obvious false flag to me that I haven't even bothered to pay much attention to it. But when someone said last night, why would they do it? Well, the only reason I can think of is that if that's where a bunch of billionaires want to go and hide away from the next world war, they probably don't want a bunch of angry, irritated natives who are sufficiently well armed to take exception to their invasion of their island. Is that even relevant to what's actually happening? I have no idea. But that's what that's an obvious logical reason. So anyhow, but let's get on to the subject here, and then I'll do the super chats afterwards. It's kind of funny because I was interested in I was thinking about what am I going to talk about tonight, because I was kind of tired, and I didn't really have anything specifically though I wanted to talk about other than the stuff we've been doing on the unauthorized. But Owen and I are going to talk about that tomorrow. So, but then I started just poking around, reading some stuff, and what was really interesting was that I found some information that's directly relevant to my recent talks on evolution. Hey, will you shut the door, please? Sorry about that. Anyhow, so we ended up, I ended up reading about more regarding the relationship genetically between chimps and humans. And what really, okay, just a sec, I got to ban this guy. You're going to tell me that I'm not a true Christian? You can be gone. So if you recall, when I did the debate, such as it was, with J.F. Gary Apey, we talked about the distance in terms of fixed mutations between the latest chimp-human common ancestor. And I ran through the time frame and demonstrated pretty clearly that it was not possible there just isn't enough time for that many mutations to get fixed throughout the entire species. And what was really interesting about these articles that I read is that they related directly to something that I noticed that I thought was really strange. And I even mentioned it, I think, at the time, because, in fact, John Yossarian just referred to it. He says, when JF was saying that some people are closer to chimps than other, was he talking about his girlfriend? No, what I was thinking of, though, was that the total genetic divergence between humans is so great in comparison with what should be the much greater distinction between humans and chimpanzees, and humans and the last chimp-human common ancestor. And that anomalies tend to leap out at me. The way that I think and the way that I notice things, I'm pretty good at pattern recognition, and I'm pretty good at noticing when something sticks out as an anomaly. So that was something that I remembered, but I didn't look into it. I'd kind of done as much as I wanted to do on that subject and moved on. And so what was interesting is that I read this article, and nobody who is a serious scientist or who's a serious evolutionary fetishist is going to take this seriously at first, because it's stuff that appears in these, Christian Science creationist organizations. In this particular case, it was an interview with a geneticist who is the director of life sciences at the Institute for Creation Research. Now, of course, everybody's going to be incredibly dubious about this. Everyone who believes in the theory of evolution by natural selection is going to immediately apply the genetic fallacy and claim, well, because he's at the Institute of Creation Research, he must be wrong. I remind you that is literally and actually a logical fallacy. It's the logical fallacy called the genetic fallacy, which is kind of ironic considering the topic at hand. And what's interesting, though, looked at the he ran a genome center, and he'd been working on plants and animals, but never had anything to do with humans or chimpanzees or anything. But apparently back in around 2004, he started looking at the scientific publications that said that there's this 98 to 99% DNA similarity between modern humans and modern chimpanzees. And so he pointed out correctly that it's actually a speculative theory, and they need their statistical models to work in the time frames. And we're all very familiar with the time frame argument, so we don't need to go that. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. He says, the first thing I noticed when I was reading these articles was that the researchers were throwing out a lot of data. They were cherry-picking the areas of DNA between humans and chimps that were highly similar and throwing out areas that would not line up properly. When I researched the data, and remember, this is written in 2012. When I researched the data, I was coming up with DNA similarities between 81 to 86% when I included the dissimilar data. Anyhow, of course, he got sneered at and whatever. So then he published another paper in 2016, and he looked at all 101 data sets that went into originally building the chimpanzee genome. He sampled 25,000 sequences at random and began analyzing and comparing them to human, and he found out that over half the data sets were extremely similar to human, the other half were extremely dissimilar to human. It appeared the initial chimpanzee genome was contaminated with human DNA. And so, this is indicative of poorly executed science at best, and it is indicative of purposeful fraud at worst. And we already know, we've talked about this, that most science today, not some, not a lot, most science today is not reproducible. That's why they call it the reproducibility crisis, because modern science is fundamentally unreliable. You cannot rely upon it. The scientists are dishonest, the funding is dishonest, the journals are dishonest. There is too much human dishonesty and too many points that human dishonesty can throw the process off the course and interfere with the method for it to be trusted. So anyhow, he says, it's difficult to determine because it's a flawed product. Based on my work, I'm not seeing more than an 85% DNA similarity to human. And so this is where it gets really interesting, because remember, this is an article from 2000, or no, this one has to be from like 2016. So that one's a little newer, but he started working on this more like 2008, and so then I went and kept reading through this, and there's a newer article, same guy, published in October 2018, where he points out that the more that genetics research advances, the more that we're seeing that the percentage of human-chimp dissimilarity is much, much greater, 15 times greater than the original estimates. And so And now where it gets really interesting is that, this guy can be dismissed because, he works at a creation institution. But what it gets fascinating is that the latest research paper on the chimp genome bug how does he describe himself? He is a evolutionist. And what he found out was that he downloaded the UCSC Genomics site. From there, he downloaded the latest alignments, and he found out that 4.06% of the human genome had no alignment to the chimp assembly. 5.18% was in the CNVs relative to chimp. 1.12% differed due to SNPs in the 1-to-1 best aligned regions, and 0.28% differed due to indels within the 1-to-1 best aligned regions. The percentage of nucleotides in the human genome that had 1-to-1 exact matches in the chimpanzee genome was 84.38%. Now that's pretty remarkable, considering that the other guy's estimate, if you recall, was 85%. And this is something that people are, the scientists, the biologists, are clearly attempting to avoid. They're clearly attempting to get away from this because it completely demolishes the idea that humans evolved from a common ancestor with chimpanzees. It doesn't work. It's absolutely false. And the more that science examines it, the more genetics that are discovered, the more we're going to see that it's false. And then that's not all. That's not all. You may recall that chimpanzees have a different chromosomal. I think they have, what is it, one more chromosome? I need to make sure that I'm explaining this correctly. Okay. Yeah, it's the humans have chromosome 2, whereas chimpanzees have 2 chromosomes, which are called chromosome 2A and 2B. And the explanation for this, and this is well known, but the explanation for this is that the 2 chromosomes merge to become 1. However, that doesn't work, because now that we have better tools to look at this stuff, what they're showing is that the gaps, if you can see that where they have the little gaps there, there isn't enough information they're still missing information. And so this shouldn't be possible with the way that this fusion is supposed to take place. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I know this stuff, but you can even see, this is the more important part. There's actually 2 cases against that. One is that gap there that they showed, but I'm just going to read this here so you can understand what you're seeing. It says, perhaps the greatest problem with the idea of a cryptic centromere is that it is completely situated inside the actively expressed protein coding gene ANKRD30BL, with sections of it located in both intron and exon regions according to the aligned transcripts in the figure. That's the figure you see right here. Ankyrin is a specific protein associated with the plasma membrane in eukaryotic cells and is involved in the interaction of the cytoskeleton with integral membrane proteins. So the point is that it shouldn't be possible. It shouldn't, the transformation should not have been possible inside this particular gene. They say, the summary is, The fact that the cryptic centromere is a functional region inside a protein coding gene encompassing both protein coding and non-coding regions strongly implies it is a key gene feature, not a defunct centromere. So again, the more information that we have, the more data, accurate data that we get regarding the human and chimpanzee genetics involved, the more it is becoming clear that the scenario that has been proposed is simply impossible. And this shouldn't be a big surprise because we already knew from the mathematical model that I've discussed that it was incredibly unlikely in the first place. So, anyhow, I have to admit, I'm just a little bit disappointed because I was kind of hoping that my argument was going to be one that would help sink evolutionary theory once and for all, but they don't even need that mathematical argument, because when the genetic difference is increased by a factor of 15, then it's not even remotely possible. It's not credible in the slightest. The music that played, I hit something on one of the websites that I was looking at, and it started to play it. So anyhow, I'll put this in more coherent form in a blog. There's a reason why I'm a writer and not a public speaker. So I hope this made at least a little bit of sense to you. But I think it's really exciting because the theory of evolution is totally and completely useless. Totally and completely useless with regards to scientific advancement. None of the scientific advancements that we are seeing is the result of applying the orthodox understanding of evolution by natural selection. And so, if we're going to look this up, if we're going to learn more, we have to be open to new models. We have to be open to new theories. Stephen Delaney says, do you disavow evolution entirely, or do you make a distinction between... evolution means change. I do not disavow change. That would be ridiculous. Change happens. I totally disavow the idea that species create new species as a result of genetic mutation and natural selection. I used to be a skeptic. At this point, I am very, very close to becoming a open and outright denier. What I would like to see is more widespread scientific acceptance of the genetic differences that we just described. I don't know yet for certain that what that guy is saying is true. Yes, there's several different people saying that now, but I would like to see a general consensus among genetic scientists that is correct, because I don't have the ability to analyze it for myself. Sammy Bandit clearly is read up on this. Given that there's 5% or so unknown source in the human genome, does your TENS argument still have merit, since it showed that we must have some unknown source in the genome? Well, my argument has merit. It's just not, my argument is actually correct. This would prove my argument correct, but it would also render it irrelevant. It's what was actually a relatively good observation ceases to become a good observation and just becomes entirely obvious to everybody. So, not a big deal, not a problem. I'd be very, very satisfied to know that that was the situation, because I said, I think 10 years ago, I wrote that genetic science is going to entirely explode the final remaining vestiges of neo-Darwinianism that survive. It's going to completely eradicate the theory of evolution by natural selection. And now we're beginning to see that. We're getting very, very close to that if we're not already there. And so I think that's pretty interesting. Essa Graham says, could you somehow use the law of entropy as an argument against the theory of evolution? A lot of people have tried, but I don't think you can do it very successfully. I don't think you're going to convince anyone. So anyhow, Silver Sister says, scientists should just accept that they're not always going to get the answer they're looking for. Well, they're supposed to, but again, science does not have logos anymore. This is a consequence of the de-Christianization of science. You cannot trust a non-Christian scientist. You simply can't. He isn't necessarily lying, but he doesn't have any commitment to the truth. He doesn't have any commitment to logos. And so, scientists are human too. You can't expect them to not be susceptible to human temptation. All right, I'm going to hit the super chats now. So if you have any, please go ahead and fire away. Also, I'm going to remind you that this is let's see, how are we doing here for, okay, so we currently have 1,294 subscribers, and so it'd be great to see that get up over 1,500 by the end of the day tomorrow. So if you're considering signing up at unauthorized.tv, I would encourage you to do so because it is only going to get better. So let's start with one that I missed yesterday. What is your opinion of Mencius Moldbug? I think he's more interesting than he is correct. I think that he's a genuinely honest guy who is handicapped by his inability to accept or understand Christianity, Christian morality, and you can only get so far if you reject logos and you reject the truth. You will run into limitations, and I think that that's what he has done. The whole cathedral and the bazaar thing is interesting and relevant. I very much dislike the use of the term cathedral, and that actually, looks, I don't think it's intentional wizardry on his part, but it tends to kind of look that way. I really haven't paid much attention to him in probably 5 or 6 years because I didn't see that his models were particularly useful to me. Your mileage might vary. Bears Lightyear says, hey, love the streams. Wondering if there's a chance you'd ever do a Voxiversity or stream on logical fallacies and how to combat them when they appear. That's a good idea, although I'd want to make sure that I did my homework because I have a tendency to forget exactly what the excluded middle is and that sort of thing. I'm better at recognizing them and counteracting them than in explaining them or labeling them. I can do it, but I have to actually concentrate. And, that's not it's not exactly on my short list, but I think that's a good idea. Boingo Bear says, thank you, sir. Thank you, Boingo Bear. It's kind of amazing to see all the bears here. And Joel Herring says, listening to you because of Owen. As I think I mentioned, Owen and I are going to be doing a stream tomorrow to talk about our plans for unauthorized.tv. Unauthorized Bear, he's already grabbed the name, says, I can't wait till you guys take over the world. We don't want the world. We just want to have a place where we can speak the truth and speak our minds without people, constantly attempting to undermine us. It's irritating and distracting. Boothiel Bear says, are there any long-term plans to allow for live streaming? Actually, it already allows for live streaming. In fact, I was experimenting with it yesterday and completely failing to get it to work, except for I know why it didn't work. I think I could get it to work, but at the present, the most that I would do is like simul stream it because it doesn't have any chat functionality yet. It doesn't have any chat functionality yet. So, we need to work on that. And yes, the plan is to allow for a super chat like system. I believe Owen already talked about it. We had a conversation about that last night. He was saying, and he's already said this publicly, so I'm not, revealing any secrets, but he was talking about the stress that having so many super chats was putting on him because, he's a honest guy and he wants to provide fair value. And so if people are, giving him $5 to answer a question, he wants to answer a question. But, I think part of why his streams were so long is because there was no way for him to stop the incoming flow. I mean, you guys know I just say, hey, hour's up. I'll hit the other super chats tomorrow, which, I do. But I have much smaller traffic and I have a lot fewer super chats, so it's manageable. But, for Owen, it wasn't. And so I had the idea of coming up with a limited form of super chat so that if people just want to make a contribution, they can. But the creator has control over how many he's going to have that session. So at the beginning of the session, you can say, okay, I'm going to take 15 super chats and, that's it. Or maybe I'm only going to take super chats until we get to, X value. Not that you're going to keep going until you get that money, but once you get to that point, no more super chats. So, Boot Heel Bear says, I'd love to start following y'all there exclusively one day. I think that's going to be possible. I mean, we're going to be doing more than you think, more than you even imagine. I'll just tell you that right now. VFM Bear says, SDL, VFM Werebears and Alt Hero for the rhetoric and the lulz. Yeah, I think that we probably need to do that. We already have the VFM in there. C-Speaks says, the Windows notification sound seems to occur when you're using your mouse. Wondering, is it wired or wireless? Sound is always of a USB device connecting but not disconnecting. Well, I do have a wireless mouse, so here, let me experiment here. I'm going to pop the battery out. I wonder if it has to do with if a battery's dying. And then I just turned it on, so let me know if that made the noise. It would be nice to figure it out because I can't hear it, but obviously it's annoying all of you. Jack Cool says, my parents attend converged churches and sister openly asks for blessings from the power of this world. Yeah, praying to the prince of the powers of the air is not a good idea. How can I do anything to influence them and don't know where else I could ask for advice from? Well, what I would do is I would initiate a discussion with them to talk about what the power of this world is, and then show them the verses in the Bible where they talk about the power of this world, and ask them openly, do you worship Satan? Is that your God? Owen has that phrase, who is your master? But that's essentially what you're asking them, and that's what you should ask them, because maybe they do, I don't know. Or maybe they're just confused and you just need to educate them. Chris Scheuer says, how to take someone out of the science cult. I think that if they're readers, that you can have them read Thomas Kuhn on the scientific revolutions, and then have them read up on the reproducibility crisis. I don't know how anyone intelligent can read through that and still blindly subscribe to, well, science says, studies say. Total nonsense. Muffhead says, went to an independent Baptist church today. Women speaking at the pulpit, praising of diversity. Convergence is high. Is it everywhere? It's invading everywhere. It's not successful everywhere. I would not attend that church again because that is not a church where they actually worship Jesus Christ. Evan Schultz says, speaking of conspiracies, remember the company that Darwin kept? Huxley's and Galton's off the top of my head. Yeah, but I mean, I think there's a difference between a scientific community, where people are genuinely trying to figure things out. Now, yes, Darwin was not a God-fearing man. He was very bitter at God, and so he wanted to come up with an idea like he did. But it's a reasonable and rather elegant logical construction. It's wrong because its assumptions are wrong, but I don't think that you can compare that to, he wasn't trying to, take over the world or anything like that. I think that he was attempting to discover truth as he felt he could accept it, would be the way that I would put it. Cave Bear says, if you want to stop sleeping and go for 3-hour super chats, I'm in. Oh, we'll do it sometime just for kicks. I'm sure at some point in time we'll have, some kind of fundraiser for something or whatever. YouTube and Comics Mogul, watch out Steam. Yeah, I do find it bizarre that I'm involved in all these random things, and then I not doing as much in the game world, which is always where I've been. My anchor's always been. It was really kind of surprising that we were the first to experiment with true 3D real estate, and we actually signed up. We created a company. We created a number of houses using our 3D game technology, and we actually signed up with a couple of elite real estate companies. It didn't work out because it was a little bit too expensive, and the real estate companies would not follow our lead. What we were going to have to do in order to actually exploit it was to form our own real estate company, and that just struck me as not being fun. So we ended up not doing it, but not before the local NBC affiliate did a really interesting television piece on that. In fact, I think I'm going to put it up on the unauthorized, just for kicks. Maybe that'll be my first premium content. But what was really bizarre was that I got this note on LinkedIn from a girl that I had dated in college, and she actually works now for one of the two companies that are doing 3D real estate. And so it's just this bizarre double blast from two different aspects of the past. So you never know where life's going to take you. I mean, why am I doing comics? That makes no sense to me. I mean, I'm glad that people like the comics that we're doing, and it's actually kind of fun, but it still strikes me and my close friends as just being something that none of us would have ever anticipated. So, Brazilian Bear asks, "Hey Vox, how old do you think the world is really?" I have no idea. I don't subscribe at all to the 6,000-year-old theory. When we have, if I recall correctly, we actually have written records that are older than that. But I don't know how accurate the scientific estimates are these days. So, I mean, I know what the conventional understanding is. I used it when we were talking about evolution. That's kind of the maximum as far as we know. But Stephen Delaney says, consider this an early donation for the Darkstream-a-thon. Thanks for your work, Vox. You're very welcome. Thank you guys for tuning in. Cave Bear points out Satan is not in hell. He rules earth until judgment. Well, exactly. That's why I keep telling people the problem of evil is not a problem for Christians. Without evil, Christianity doesn't exist. Without evil, Jesus Christ didn't need to come. He didn't need to die. There's no need for any sacrifice for anybody. The problem of evil is for people who don't believe in the supernatural. C-Speak says, you mentioned in a past stream about teaching your kids to read. Any resources, tips you'd like to share? Currently reading The Dark is Rising to my son, but he's 5, so it's a bit heavy on detail for him. Yeah, I wouldn't read that to him now. 5 is too young. 9, I would say like 9 or 10 is around ideal. You want him to be roughly Will's age, and they'll enjoy it the most. I mean, sometimes you just got to be careful too. The dog is doing pretty well, by the way. I'm happy to be able to say. Excuse me, still not out of the woods, but he's gained 10 kilos, and he's more or less his normal self, and he's playing with the other dogs, and he's not in pain all the time. I mean, he does have good days and bad days, but his life does not appear to be in immediate peril anymore. And thanks to all of you who prayed and donated super chats so that I could pay the vet bills and all that. But I was reading one of my kids, The Gray King, and I had to stop, and because I know what happens later in the book, and there was absolutely no way that I was going to read that, when things were so touch and go with our own dog. So, Cave Bear approved of my comment on his non-question comment. But in terms of teaching kids to read, the key is, or what I did is I created a PowerPoint. In fact, I'll see if I can find the PowerPoint. I'll put it up somewhere where people can download it. But I created 2 PowerPoints, and the first one's very simple and just has the basic, all 26 letters and the basic sound plus a picture of something like, an alligator. And, it's alligator. And then there's a second PowerPoint that puts the 2 sounds together. Puts the 2 so that you have like CK together. K, duck. Cheese. It was so funny. I mean, all my kids were dubious about it, but my son was the best. He loved the silent E. Because when we would get to the E, and I don't know how we'd indicated that it was the silent E, but because I think that instead of the picture, when I had the actual sounds, for the letter combinations, I had a word up there, and so he could tell which word was the silent E. And so we would get to it, and he would just say, E, the silent E. But he hated the silent GH. I mean, I don't think that he actually believed it was really a thing. I think that it was bad enough, the GH that makes the F sound like laugh, but the silent GH in the word 8, we would get to that, and he wouldn't say it. He would just look at me, totally skeptical. It was pretty funny. But anyhow, all of our kids learned how to read um, at about the age of 3. And so, it's, I'm trying to think if any of them didn't. I think they were all reading really basic stuff, like the first Bob books. And then you also want to get you want to pick up a copy of the Bob books. And so, when you say books for 5, 6, 7, are you talking about books for him to read or books to read to him? I'll have to think about that and look, because when you've got a number of kids, it all kind of becomes a big blur. I mean, the one thing I really remember that was so important was the Bob books. They're fantastic. If you've got a kid and you're teaching a kid to read, get the Bob books. Absolutely. Baron von Metzengerstein says, about unauthorized.tv, are those of us contributing already to Voxiversity DS going to have that carry over for premium? Yes, but it doesn't yet. That's on the list of things that we need to arrange for. I think I even mentioned it on the blog today. I described it as assignable memberships, which is, we actually talked about potentially using, like letting people sign up for Voxiversity in the Darkstream via unauthorized.tv, but we've decided not to do that because we've got a new payment processor who is actually very interested in working with us, and we'd rather actually steer some of the business to them. So, but we'll work on that. So, C-Speak says, the question was worth the money to hear you do the phonetics. Could you recommend books for his age group? Oh, okay. I saw that one already. Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, we actually have a little Android app that Mark wrote for me that is essentially the same thing as the PowerPoint. I think that's what I was using actually instead of the PowerPoint most recently. But I'll see if I can dig this stuff up and for those of you who are interested in teaching your kids how to read, which I highly recommend, it's a very effective way to do it. Like I said, all of our kids were reading very, very early, perhaps partially as a result of that. So, do we have any other questions? Well, we've got a couple more minutes here, so I'll be happy to take another question or two. If anybody has anything in mind. Did anyone else use the Puddle Lane books to teach themselves to read? No. TruthSpeak says, is it the same payment processor that is working with SubscribeStar? I have no idea. I don't know anything about SubscribeStar, nor would I talk about it in public in order to encourage SJWs to go after them. The question is too personal, and I'm not going to answer it. I don't talk about my. Fortuitous Video says, careful Vox, I've been able to piece together you have at least one son and 2 daughters just from your streams. It's not about, everybody knows I have a son. My son had worldwide press coverage. I'm not trying to hide the fact that I have a family and so forth, but I'm not going to give you guys any detail on their actual ages and so forth. Also, I do attempt to be honest as possible, but don't worry. I'm fully capable of misdirection when it comes to protecting my family. Let's see. If you're ever hurting for topics, you could always give us an update on the Great Chicken Saga. The chickens are doing well. The rooster is enormous. He looks like a turkey. He's this huge, huge white creature, and he's much nicer than Owen's roosters apparently, because he's never, he never bothers anybody. He doesn't peck at people or anything. Box, presumably you would get rid of all government foreign aid. That is correct. Should one make private donations to other countries, or should it all be to charities that work in their own country? I think it's wherever your heart leads you. Johnny B says, if I sign up for basic, is it easy to upgrade to premium later? Yeah, I believe so. You can change it any time. Do you think Jesse Lee Peterson could be on your unauthorized? I wouldn't have any objection to it. I like Jesse Lee. Jesse Lee is one of the only people whose shows I've gone on since I stopped talking to the media and to the new media. Did any of the new atheists comment on your book about them? Sam Harrison and I actually worked together a little bit after that. He asked me to help him on that science study that was the basis of his book, The Moral Landscape. I reviewed his Christian questions for him. Let's see. If you had to get a service animal, would it be a meerkat? Do I look crazy? No, I mean, it's a little known fact that meerkats are the leading cause of death in Africa. Everybody thinks it's hippos or lions or something. It's not, it's meerkats. That's why they call them the piranha of the Serengeti. Kirsten Anders says, what do you think of teaching kids to be bilingual? My future husband is learning Chinese and wants to teach our kids. Good luck. I don't think he'll be successful, but you can certainly try. My kids are trilingual, but that's because they have to be. It's very difficult to do it. I mean, I did learn to speak German well, not fluently, but with a good accent and fully conversationally. But we were fortunate to have a really, really good German teacher. Ryan Young says, personally, it ticks me off when people take a guilt-free vacation to build a well in Belize when people need help here. I agree. I mean, I'm not a big fan of missionary work these days when we need missionary work all across the West. Thoughts on Father Seraphim Rose? I have none. What do you think of Louder with Crowder? Do you think he could be an unauthorized TV? Well, I think he'd be massively successful if he wanted to, but I don't think that. I think that he's more focused on the mainstream. I think the only way that he would end up on unauthorized is if we become a lot bigger. I mean, like 3 orders of magnitude bigger, or if he finds himself getting blackballed, and that's entirely possible. Did Sam Harris admit his dishonesty? No, we didn't talk specifically about that. Vox, if you could do one exercise, which would it be? I would probably do either bench press or behind the back pull-ups. Those are kind of my 2 primary ones. Did you study Japanese formally when you were in Japan? Yes, and for 2 years before it. I don't speak Japanese now because it's been way too long and I learned it too late for it to just stick. I can remember a few phrases here and there. But I was actually quite conversational in it, fully conversational in it by the time I came back. I wish I'd been able to keep it up, but I understand why I didn't, so it's okay. Do you have any book recommendations for homeschooling? Just start with the Collier Junior Classics. AM says, I love how, let's see. I just missed that. I love how certain people like you, Vox, have no problem working with individuals you disagree with on a scientific and philosophical level. It just shows how much character you have. That or a lack of discernment, you could say, I suppose. No, I don't expect people to agree with me. I don't expect everybody to understand me. It says right on the blog, I don't expect you to agree. I don't even expect you to understand. So, if you had complete power over the U.S. for a year, what would you do? Yeah, I don't think I want to address that one. Let's see. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Let's see. Vox, you've said in the past there are very few like you and that you haven't met many of similar character and of a superior intellect. Have you heard of Maynard James Keenan? No, I have not. I mean, there are people that I've met that I, consider to be of a superior intellect, and even a better character. My Uncle Chuck Krulak, I've had tremendous admiration for my whole life. He's probably, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, in light of some of his post-military career, but as far as everything that I've ever known about the man, his character is better than mine, and he's certainly smarter than I am. But once you meet a few people like that, and Umberto Eco was humbling to be around him. Martin Van Creveld is one of the two genuine geniuses I've ever met. The other one was Prince, but I know Martin a lot better than Prince. So it's not like I've never met anybody that I don't look up to or anything. It's just that most of the smart people that I know have character flaws that are different than mine. I have, don't get me wrong. I've got plenty of character flaws, but they tended to be of what, a type that most people consider to be relatively harmless. I was just basically a hedonist who is happy being in a rock band. So, all right, well, great. Well, thanks so much for tuning in tonight. I appreciate it. And again, I would encourage you to check out unauthorized.tv. We should have Owen's latest stream up there very soon. And check it out. So remember, science fraud plus genetics equals the death of evolution by natural selection. This is the Darkstream. I'm Vox Day.